We consume more information than ever before, which means we need better systems than we've ever had to organize that information in a usable way. One of the best ways to deal with information overload is the code method: capture, organize, distill, express. But what if we could both capture and organize and combine those steps in one so that we always know what we're capturing and where it's been organized? With Obsidian Bases finally out of beta, we can now do this in a meaningful way. We can combine the capture and the organize steps by using the Web Clipper extension to capture information and the Bases plugin to organize it automatically. The Web Clipper extension lets you template the information retrieved from websites, automating the capture process. Bases turns your notes into a database, which helps you simplify the organization of what you've captured. Together, Obsidian Bases and the Web Clipper extension make it incredibly easy for you to keep track of all the sources and information that you're adding into your vault so you feel less overwhelmed and you can always find what you're looking for. Hi, my name is Callum, also known as Wanderloots, and welcome to today's video on Obsidian Bases and the Web Clipper extension, how to build a source base within your Obsidian vault. Bases is a new core plugin, which means that it's built directly into Obsidian and will continue getting updates by the core team, so you never have to worry about it being deprecated or becoming obsolete in the future. Because it's a new core plugin, Bases was part of the longest running beta in Obsidian history, but now it's finally available for everyone to use. Bases lets you create custom structures for your vault that automatically index your notes based on specific properties. It's similar to Dataview, but it's more beginner friendly and it's also interactive. You can edit notes directly from the base itself, which may seem familiar if you've ever used Notion before. There's honestly no end to what you can do with Bases, and it's just getting more and more powerful. I'm excited to show you what it can do. In today's video, I'm going to walk through step by step how to build a sources base from scratch and connect it to the Web Clipper extension. That way, new users can see how you can build a base from scratch, and experienced users can see a new use of this incredible tool. A reminder that if you're finding this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm working on making YouTube my full-time career, so any support you can give me is very much appreciated. Also, I'll be taking all the templates that I build today and make them available for my YouTube members. So if you're interested in getting access to all of my templates in Obsidian, consider joining the membership. Thank you to my existing members. I appreciate your support very much. Now let's dive into Obsidian Bases and Web Clipper to build a sources base. In today's video, I'm going to walk through building a new base from scratch. So this is going to work for anyone who's never made a base before. I'll show you how you can get started and then how you can connect it to something like the Web Clipper so that you can keep better track of your sources in one spot. This also works for including Zotero, for example, bringing in your literature notes or your research into your sources base. So really, it's just building from the ground up a new foundation on how I'm planning on dealing with sources in Obsidian. So I'm going to walk through how to build that. And then I'm going to walk through a couple other examples, including how I'm going to update my existing book space to include a few new tips and tricks based on the updated Obsidian features that have come out with Bases. But let's get started. I've put together a playlist called Obsidian Bases, new core plugin, how to future-proof your note organization. So there are 4 videos in this series so far. This is the 5th. The first one walks through much more in depth what Bases are and how you can use them, how you can get them installed, everything you need to get started, including how to build a book space like this, where you have the card view and you can sort by table and you can organize all of your books in one spot. The second video walks through the new card view that I just showed you with the book space. I also show how I take my original base I built here for books and update it to include the card view. So I recommend checking that out if you want to see more how the visual system works. And then I did a deep dive in video 3 into project management and how you can structure automatic project systems within Obsidian. Specifically, I use Agile project management. And then finally, in the 4th video, I show you how I plan using Google AI Studio to structure a roadmap that then gets put into my project. And then actually a custom plugin that I've been working on that's still in beta. So if you're interested in seeing how I use AI to help me organize my projects, basically using AI as a project manager, I recommend checking that out. The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that, first of all, you are updated to at least version 1.9.10, because version 1.9.10 is the release that includes the Bases plugin. And then once you've updated, you can then go over to Core Plugins, find Bases, and turn that on. And that's it. Then what we can do is we can go create a new tab, and you can press Command P or Control P, and you can create a new base. So let's do that, and we'll call this Sources. So what just happened there? Well, this is a specific source.base file. So if I go to the side here, you can see that there's sources and it has the base characteristic. So effectively what that means is there's a specific syntax, kind of like Dataview, if you're familiar with that, where there's an organization happening behind the scenes that's filtering all of your notes. That's what this filter comes up on the side here. But right now, you can see it just has all 284 results. So this is my Wanderloots tutorial vault. So this has the entire vault being pulled into this one table. So if we want to start filtering, we can go up to the side here, and we have an option between all views and this view. So if we click on all views, we can add a filter that then gets applied to every single component of this particular base. Whereas for this view, it's only for one specific view that we're filtering. And views are over on the side here where it says table. So you can see there's a table view, and we can also add a type of card view. And that's where it turns each note into a card that we can then introduce a cover property and a few other things that I'm going to show you in a little bit. Let's stick with the table view for now. So the goal here is to take this massive vault-wide filter and apply it in a way that we exactly know how all of the files are coming in from the Web Clipper or from other sources. So the key way to do that is to use a filter and properties. And this is where properties start to become a lot more powerful. So properties are, for example, if we go to this note here, I can add property, and I can call this, for example, tags, and maybe put tutorial. Now this note has a property called tutorial, and if we look at the source mode on the side here, you can see that there's this little front matter section between these three lines. So basically, what Bases does is it takes that front matter, those little YAML it's called here, and it produces a filter. So we could go here and we could say where file has tag source. And now all of my notes that have source notes will be filtered here. And we've effectively just filtered the entire base to include only source notes. So again, I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. I just want to show you how easy it is to start filtering here, where you don't have to use a Dataview type syntax where you have to remember how you're organizing everything and go into the code and do it yourself. Now you can just click and you can add as many filters as you want to. And again, if you're interested in seeing how this works much more in depth, I recommend watching the first video in the series because I explain every component of this in a lot more detail. But now, since we're making a very specific source base here, and we want to have this be compatible with the Web Clipper plugin, let's take a look at the Web Clipper plugin so that we know what it outputs so that we can then structure the filter of the organization. When we capture with the Web Clipper, we want to be able to organize it into our Obsidian base. For the Web Clipper here, you can just search Obsidian Web Clipper, go to the website, and then you can choose which browser you want to add it to. So I just added mine to Chrome. When you click add, it takes you to the Chrome web store, and you can then install the extension here, which pulls up this little button in the top right corner. And that's it, it's installed. You may need to refresh your browser, restart your browser from scratch in order for the extension to take effect, so I recommend doing that before getting going. Let's take a look at the settings for a moment. So the first setting you need to do with the Web Clipper is to insert your vault. So for myself, if I go down and right click, you can see that I have all of my vaults listed here. And you just need to have the name of this vault match exactly what you've input here. And then by doing that, when you click on the Web Clipper button, you can see that there's an option here where your vaults get pulled up on the side on where it's going to be added into. So that's why we need to make sure that your vault is listed here first, because that's where we're going to pull the clippings from the web and put it into the vault based specifically on the folder that you've established that I'm going to show you in a moment. So then we have a few options here for hotkeys on how to open the Obsidian Clipper, and then also how to toggle highlighter mode, which again, I'll show you in a few minutes. And then we have the default save behavior here. So you can either copy this to clipboard, save it as a separate file, or add it directly to Obsidian, which is what we're going to do. And then if you want, you can turn off this save clip note without opening it. But for the purposes of demonstrating here, I want to open that note. Basically what happens is if you download something, like I go here and click add to Obsidian, it'll automatically open the page for me with a new tab showing this playlist. So it'll pull open this note no matter what you're doing. You can see it just popped to the front of my screen. So if you don't want that, then you can turn this setting on, and that's it. Now we can go down to properties. This just has a full list of properties across all of your different templates that we have on the side here. So that, if you remember, matches like what we have with the properties in Obsidian. These are the exact same things. So the templates that you build on the side make use of the exact same property format as Obsidian notes, as Obsidian bases. So all of this just integrates really nicely together. Then we can get into the highlight section, and this will make more sense when I show you, but basically you just want to highlight the page content turned on, and that's all the settings you need to do here. And then we get into interpreter, and I'm not going to get into that today because that's a bit more of an advanced mode. But basically what happens with the interpret web pages is you can use an existing LLM like Anthropic, Google Gemini, OpenAI, Perplexity, and if you have an API key, you're able to ask the LLM to interpret the page for you and then save the note directly. So I'll make another video that goes deeper into that, especially on how you can use a local model so that you're not sending your research to an external company. But for today, we're just going to focus on the basic Web Clipper functionality. And that's it. So now we get down to templates. This is the most important part of how the Web Clipper extension connects to Obsidian Bases. And what we do is we use predetermined words and variables so that we can take a website, a page, a URL, and then parse it into a specific format. So you can see here, when I go to this article on my website, Augmented Personal Knowledge Management, one of my early newsletters, and I click on the Obsidian extension, it pops up with a little box here showing me a preview of what this note would look like if I ran it through the articles template. So you can see here, there's the articles template, and you can pick and choose which template you want. And each one will go through the website, the URL, and convert it into a slightly different format so that it looks how you want it to. And that's what I'm going to show you very quickly so that you can customize these templates for different types of websites. But now just back to the basic template for a second. So the first thing we need to do is decide what type of behavior we want. So you can add it to an existing note at the bottom. You can add it to a daily note at the top. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. You can have overwrite note if you want, which will make more sense when we get to the highlighting section. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as create new note. And what's nice too is you can create new templates for different kinds. Maybe I have article that's create article, and then I make another one that's called overwrite article. And you can just select which article template you want to use depending on the situation that you're using it for. Then we get down to the note location, and this is pretty key here. So for example, in my articles one, I've changed this to sources/clippings/article. So that means that every article I save using the extension is going to go specifically into this folder inside of my Obsidian Vault. So if we open up the side here, go over to sources, we can see there's clippings, and then there's the article setting here. That's where it will automatically pull in the note and then save it within that file path. And it's all relative to your vault. So you don't need to put vault here. You can just put the folder that you want it to be in. Then you can control which vault you want as the default. I'm just going to keep it as last used because that makes sense. It's probably the one that I'm going to keep going back to, but I can also just toggle it directly if I want to. And then we get into the template triggers. And this is pretty key, but it'll make more sense in a moment once I show you the other templates. So I'm going to just skip that for a second. Now we get down to properties, which, like I mentioned before, this is exactly what we need in order to establish a template that's going to fit perfectly into our sources base. Effectively, what we want to do is we want to establish a filter, a global filter across all of the views, the card view, the table view, and any other new views we have, so that every time we use the Web Clipper extension, the note will automatically be organized inside of this source vault. So we need to come up with a global filter. So for example, we could use file path or file folder, and we could say everything inside of the sources folder is sources, or folder is sources clippings. But you'll notice that it's only pulling in specifically the notes that have the exact file path. So that's not great. We want to come up with a global filter that can pull from everywhere across our entire vault, regardless of where it's located, because you might have sources sitting in different parts, and you still want that source to be imported into this base so that it doesn't get filtered out. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say file has property, and I'm going to introduce a new property type, and I'm going to call this content type. So you can see it's brought in a couple of my existing examples that I was testing out earlier. But basically, if we now go back to this note here, the path of self-actualization, article 2, you can see that content type is article. So if we go back to our browser for a moment and go over to the article template, we can see here that I've established as part of the article template, the content type is article. And if we go to the URL itself, it matches that content type equals article. So the reason that I'm doing it this way instead of tags is I have personally found that for filtering specifically, creating a dedicated property for the base that you want tends to be a little bit more valuable from a global filter perspective, because it's very easy to just say file has property content type. It's harder to say file has tags, article, or YouTube video, or AI chat, or podcast. Like, you have to introduce a lot more complexity. So I found it easier to introduce a new type property for each of my bases. So for example, I have type as my project management, and I'm able to then very easily just say file has property type, and then it becomes all of my files that are related to project management because it's already incorporated into my templates. If that sounded a little confusing and you want to see more how that works, I recommend watching the How to Easily Organize Projects and Tasks with Obsidian Bases, because I walk through a lot more in depth why I decided to introduce that global property. But for now, it's easy enough to just recognize that we have this new type of property that we're going to use to help filter into our overarching sources base. Because now, if we go to the properties section on our main table view, we can toggle on content type, and now we'll be able to instantly see what type of file is this. So what's cool is if you go over to the table on the side here, so we can call this all sources, and I'm just going to click duplicate this view, and we're going to call this articles. So now if I go back to configure view, you can see there's a new view here called articles, and if we click between them, they are exactly the same. And it's because they have the same global filter on the side here. But what I can do is now that I'm specifically in articles, you can see on the left-hand side, I can go down to this view and I can say specifically file content type is article. And then that provides another layer of filtration. So now the articles view only shows the articles. We can do the same thing where I'm going to just duplicate the articles view and call it YouTube. And then we can go back to the YouTube view and filter to say content type is YouTube. So you can start to see how it becomes more practical to have this global property that pulls and filters every single note we need to inside of our sources base based on content type, and then create a sub-filter within it as a separate view on the side so we can easily organize and view specific types of content. So now if we take a look at the rest of the properties here, we can see that I have the created, I have date, tags, I put article, clipping, author, schema, I'll show you that in a moment, the published date, whether or not it's processed. For me, that's just a default property on once I've captured this note and put it in my vault, have I then reviewed it? So it becomes very easy for me to quickly at a glance see if a note has been processed or not. If it has, it'll have a check mark. So that effectively turns your sources base into an inbox as well, where you could then sort or filter by whether or not the sources have been processed into the rest of your vault. And then finally, we get to this cover property here. And again, I'll show you what this variable is in a moment, but effectively what that does is it automatically pulls in, for example, this YouTube video here, it pulls in the cover image from the YouTube video itself, so that if we switch over to cards view and we rename this to cards view and we select the image property of cover, it will automatically pull in the cover image of what we're building here. So I'll show you more about that in a moment, but that's just why I'm introducing the cover image, because it makes it possible for you to see all of your sources as cards rather than just as a table. And then we get to the note content. So this is one of the most important parts. And I want to keep this relatively clean, so I'm just showing you how this works. A quick reminder that if you're finding this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and check out my existing bases playlist. I think there's a lot of information that you'll find very helpful. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the templates that I'm building today for both Bases and the Web Clipper extension, consider joining my membership, as I'll be making all of these templates a part of a kit for my YouTube members. Now let's keep building. And we have the option here to have a highlight section and then full page content. And to understand that, let's take a look at this article over here, which I have augmented personal knowledge management. And if we click on the Obsidian extension button in the top here, you can see there's this little highlighter button, enable highlighter. There's also a hotkey that's established in the general properties that you can turn on. For me, it's Option Shift H, and you can see that that pops up select elements to highlight. So if I go through and I'm reading, and I'm like, the 4 levels of personal knowledge management, that's interesting. Maybe I want to say the systems used for information processing will vary from person to person and content type to content type. So that's kind of funny that I selected this example. I didn't even realize it had content type in here, but that's perfect. So now I can just go and I can highlight this, and I have the option to just clip highlights directly, or I can go here and you can see that the highlight was automatically pulled into the note that I'm working on, and it pulls in the exact timestamp as well. So that's what this little highlight syntax does. You can just copy that directly. You don't have to worry about exactly what it means, but effectively what it's doing is it's mapping each highlight you have to a particular timestamp so that it separates it all nicely inside of your vault. And then we have this second part here, which is full page content, and that's in the curly brackets with content, and that pulls in the entire article. So now, just making sure that I'm in my Wanderloots tutorials vault, it's default applying my article template here that I have at the top, and I click add to Obsidian. It creates a new note that pulls in all of that information with specifically the highlights that I've had at the top. And what's nice is if we scroll down, oh, it's supposed to have that highlighted. Let me try a different example for a moment. Let's go to the next article again. So I'm scrolling through. Let's say we find something interesting. I can go up to the top, click on highlighter mode, and then highlight the specific section. And Once it's highlighted, go up to Obsidian extension, click add to Obsidian, and it will create that new note for me down here. And you can see again, it's pulled up this highlighted section. And if we scroll down, you can see that it's also highlighted the specific section from the article. So this is where it's kind of nice to have not just the highlights, but also the full page content. That way you can have a summary of what you found the most interesting as the highlights at the top, and then find specifically in the article itself where that highlighted part came from. So I'm not sure exactly why that didn't work for number 11, but you get the idea here where I showed you with number 12. And again, if we go back to our base, we should now have more articles in here. You can see there's 11, 12. All of the articles have been automatically populated. And if we go to our cards view, it should also have pulled in the images as well, which it just did. So this is just a really cool way that you can just go, as you're researching anyway on the internet, find something interesting, go up to the extension and click add to Obsidian, and you're basically good to go. Especially if you've already gone through and highlighted everything. That way you know exactly what you found the most interesting about that article. So that just shows you the article template. And before we get into the other examples here, I want to quickly explain more about these particular properties and get into the template triggers. For these other properties here, you can see there's the curly brackets with title, URL, date. All of these are dynamic properties that will automatically be filled in when you use the extension. So for example, if we go back to number 12, you can see that it pulled in the publish date of September 8th, 2023, the specific time that I clicked publish on that article. So if you're trying to figure out, well, what property do I want to put in here? How do I know meta property OG image is what I'm looking for the cover? Well, it's actually really easy, because if we click back into the Obsidian extension, there's these 3 dots in the top. And if you click on that, it pulls in all of the variables of that page. So you can see there's quite a lot in here. But the idea is that each of these can be put into curly brackets. And then when you click add to Obsidian using the Web Clipper extension, it will automatically pull in the information for you so you don't have to think about it. So let's say you want to have an idea on how many words there are. Well, all I would have to do is go over to my article template, click add property, call it words, put words, and you can see it even automatically switch it to a number, but you can make it a number here. And then the next time if I went and let's say I'll just delete this number 12 for a moment, delete that file, and go back and use the web extension and download it again, click add to Obsidian, you can see it's now pulled in the words property. So this is a cool way for you to go and based on each type of content that you have, each content type, which is why I called it content type, you can come up with a series of properties that are going to be the most helpful for you. And you can always click on the 3 dots to see what information is available based on the type of website that you're dealing with. And that's where we get into the template triggers. Basically, by having just http:// and https://, I've effectively turned the article template into my default template because any website is going to have one of these 2 things. So it's always going to default to using the article template if there's nothing else available. But if we click on the YouTube video for a second, I've changed it to https:// youtube.com /v=. Well, why did I do that? If we go over to YouTube for a second, to my bases video, the intro video, you can see that we have youtube.com/watch?v=. So basically what happens now, if I go and click on the Obsidian web extension up in the top here, it automatically recognizes that what we're dealing with is a YouTube video. So that way you don't have to think about switching which template you're working on because based on the URL, based on the template trigger, I've already pre-customized this specifically for YouTube videos. And then if we scroll down, you can see I'm no longer just using author, I'm using author, schema, author. And the reason for that is if we click into the specific page variables, we get a whole bunch of different information based on the fact that we're dealing with YouTube rather than my blog. So this is where you can go through and for each type of information you want to add, each content type, you can create a new template that is custom fitted for that particular website and triggered by that custom template you've indicated. I have almost the exact same information here, but rather than just having only content, I've added schema description. And the reason for that is when I click download, if I click add to Obsidian, it will pull in the full description of the YouTube video in here, including all the timestamps, along with a clickable video. So you can just watch this directly within Obsidian. And it's pulled in the cover image as well. It's pulled in all of the keywords. There's a lot of information that you can pull in here. So I don't want to go too much deeper into it, but it's just helpful for you to consider that you're able to modify this for each type of content that you're building in. Because each of those properties becoming dynamic just makes your Obsidian base that much more powerful because it gives you all of the properties on the side that you'll be able to add and filter by. So taking the time to build this correctly for yourself up front will save you a lot of time and energy down the road because you're already pre-populating your database, your Obsidian base, with all of the information that you might want to be filtering and using. Now, just one more thing quickly for YouTube videos. You'll notice with the timestamps, it doesn't have a hyperlinked timestamp. So if you want to add hyperlinks, what you can do is, I'll just delete this for a moment. We can go down to the description. I can turn on the highlighter mode and I can highlight specifically the timestamps. And now when I go to click export, click add to Obsidian, you can see it brings in all the timestamps with all of the hyperlinks. So you can just jump to that part of the video if you want to. And then it still has the full description and the full video here. And you'll notice too that this went specifically into sources, clippings, /YouTube. And that's just because inside of my YouTube template, I changed the path name here to be sources, clippings, YouTube. So for each one, you can have it automatically go into its proper folder as well, which is pretty cool. I just want to show you the final type that I'm interested in adding here, the content type. I do a lot of conversations with artificial intelligence. I use Perplexity, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude, NotebookLM, Consensus, Ponder. I use a whole bunch of different tools depending on what I'm researching and why I'm researching it. So you can create a new template for each one here. For example, here's the Perplexity one, where specifically I had to modify the note name to be slightly different. I included the template trigger of Perplexity, and I had to change a little bit the information here, but this note content stayed basically the same. So if I go back to a Perplexity conversation, for example, here's one I just started on what is the most effective way to combine agentic AI and long-term memory systems for self-learning and local AI. If I go up here, you can see that it's automatically pulled in the Perplexity template. And if I click add to Obsidian, it pulls in the full conversation from Perplexity here all in one spot. And it has a list of all the sources as well. And then if we go back to the base, you can see now that there is an AI chat type in here. And it pulls in the Perplexity logo. So again, that's just a quick way for you to be able to start keeping track of the different type of content that you're bringing in here. And it's just an easy way for you to save that whole conversation from Perplexity all in one spot. And as another example, here's one called consensus.app. This does academic research where it specifically pulls up articles and papers from scholars. So it's a little bit more credible in terms of the information that's coming in. So I created a dedicated consensus template here, and I asked the same question on what's the most effective use of agentic AI to build a true personal assistant with self-learning, similar to my question with Perplexity. And I can just go up to the Web Clipper, and you can see here, if I click on the three dots, that it pulls in even more information based specifically on consensus format of their website. And what's cool about consensus is it gives you a similar style answer to Perplexity where it has this thread here, but then at the bottom, it also gives you a list of the evidence strength and a summary, and then includes all of the resources, all of the different papers that it directly took from here. Make sure I'm clicked on this portion, and then I can click add to Obsidian. It will automatically pull in the answer from consensus, and if we scroll down, it will include a link to all the results so that I can click on it and get brought right back to where I was with all of the research. If you're interested in academic research and specifically grounding your answers in research papers and more up-to-date information and getting a bit more visual representation on the strength of the evidence for the research that you're doing, I highly recommend checking out Consensus. It's been really powerful, and I like that it grounds its answers in academic research specifically. So I feel like the information is a little bit more credible if you want to go deeper into topics. And if you're interested in trying it out and testing out the pro version, if you use the link in my description, you get 1 month free with your year membership. For example, I could go down to one of the PDFs, click on it, get brought to the actual article itself, and you can see here it'll default to the article name, and I'll be able to just add this to Obsidian and go back and grab it later. But you'll notice that the PDF from the archive doesn't let you just pull in all of the page content itself, and that's because it's a PDF. This is where you could use Zotero instead, where once you have the article name, you can use the Zotero integration plugin to connect to your research where all of your PDFs are stored as part of your reference manager in, for example, Zotero here. And I would be able to run the Zotero integration plugin and then import a note like this literature note that I have right here. This one's specifically on the concept of the extended mind. But right now, this extended mind is not sitting inside of my vault, and it would be nice if it did. All I would have to do is just add a property of content type and change it to paper. And now if we go back to the vault, I now have a paper type in here that's brought in my literature note. So I could, for example, modify my Zotero template to include a property of content type and paper or PDF or whatever it is you're looking for. So now when I go to use Consensus and get that academic paper that I'm looking for, I get brought to the PDF. I can go to the Zotero integration connection. I can save this into Agentic AI, click done, go over to Zotero where it has now been added right here, and I can go back to Obsidian and run the literature source note from Zotero, find the name of the paper, and then I can create that new note, and you can see that it automatically brought in the content type of that paper. If I go back to that base, I now have that paper in here, and you can see that it hasn't yet been processed. So if you're interested in learning more about how all that works, I know that was a lot very quickly. I do have a dedicated video that goes through how you can use Zotero and Obsidian to simplify your research. So I hope that you can see how this could be a cool way where you could then, for example, go to something like Consensus or Perplexity or wherever you're doing your research, capture the conversation information, but also capture the PDF and have both of them appear inside of your Obsidian Vault effortlessly. And I will get to the base configuration in a moment. I'm just trying to show you that from building your source repository here and building the source templates is the most important part of your base, because a database is only as useful as the information in it and only as useful as you're able to find the information based on the properties you're using. So why don't we create a new template for a moment based on one of these existing ones. I'll show you how we can update a template to work with NotebookLM. Just before we get started with the NotebookLM upgrade to the Obsidian Web Clipper, I just wanted to quickly mention that I have a full AI learning playlist that goes much more into depth on how to use NotebookLM in a whole bunch of different ways. So I recommend checking that out if you're interested in learning more how to use it. But a key component here is that if you're having a conversation with NotebookLM, let's say it's about my molecular Zettelkasten note-taking system that I've developed. If I ask a question, we have this chat component here in the middle, but if I refresh this page, this chat will disappear. So I have three options to save this note. I can go down to the bottom and click Save to Note, and that pops up and saves a note within NotebookLM itself. I can go and I can copy this and add it into an Obsidian note, or now what I can do is I can go up to the Obsidian extension, and you can see here, if I expand this, it pulled in where the source is coming from, and it also pulled in my question and the answer of NotebookLM. So if I click Add to Obsidian, you can see it popped in, it pulled in a specific link to the note itself, pulled in a cover image, and it pulled in the full conversation that I've had. So once you're done having a conversation inside of NotebookLM, you can then just use the Obsidian extension to add it in here. You can change this to content type AI chat, and if we go back to our base, we can now see it pulled in the AI chat from NotebookLM. But you'll notice the name of it, Google NotebookLM Note-Taking and Research Assistant Powered by AI. That's not very helpful. How are we going to know what NotebookLM chat we're talking about? It pulled in this generic name. That means that the article template was not really what we're looking for here. So let's delete this file for a moment. And let's take this article template and let's go to More and then Duplicate. And we'll call this one NotebookLM. Change this to NotebookLM. We're having an issue with the title here. You can see the default up on the side here is that just generic Google NotebookLM. So if we take a look at the variables, we need to find something else. We can go through and we can try and find this information to get something that's more specific to the specific chat itself. So for example, we could put selector H1, refresh this, and you can see it pulled up my molecular Zettelkasten. So basically what this did is, if you go over to the Obsidian help for a second and look at the selector variables, this is basically just a way of identifying the format of the page and then pulling in something specific like H1, and that would be the main heading on this page. So you can go and customize this as much as you want, but now if we go back and refresh this and click Add to Obsidian, we can see here it pulled up the name of my molecular Zettelkasten under NotebookLM, and it put it within the NotebookLM folder and brought in that chat here. And if we go back to the base, again, it's got everything organized perfectly. So I hope that shows you how you can take one of your existing templates and update it and then customize this so that, for example, rather than just having this generic template trigger, we can go and grab the intro here, notebooklm.google.com, replace this template trigger with notebooklm.google.com, and then now every time we go in to save something, it will automatically default to the NotebookLM template rather than one of the other ones. And if you're interested in all of these templates, I am making them available for my YouTube members, so consider joining my membership if you would like a bundle that includes the base we're working on and all of the Web Clipper templates in one go. But now that we have a few articles and YouTube videos and AI chats all in here, let's take a look at Obsidian Bases itself and how we can start to organize this information more meaningfully. So like I showed you earlier, I would probably create a new view for each content type throughout here. But we can also include all the properties that might be useful on the side. So we have content type, we have processed, and what's important to remember is that the properties that are applied to a particular view only stay within that view. So if I go and I add, for example, created as a property to see where each of these notes were created, and then I go take a look at the articles view, that property is no longer there. So what I found the most useful is to build in all the properties that you think would be valuable into your all sources view, and then duplicate the all sources view for the other views, and you already have all of your properties laid out. So you might want to add tags. We can include the reference link. We don't need to include the title because the file's already there. You could include updated time if you wanted to see when the file was updated. And you can just drag and drop and move these around too. It's honestly much more powerful than Dataview when it comes to organizing and interacting with the files, even if Dataview has a bit more complexity that provide additional benefits outside of what Bases can do at the moment. But if you're interested in learning more about that, I recommend watching the first video where I talk much more in depth on the comparison of Dataview and Bases. And you can just keep going and adding whatever elements you want into here and really customize how this sources base looks. So now I'm just going to delete the other ones for a moment. Oh, cool. If we see the consensus one, the image that it brings in is actually a preview of the specific thread rather than some generic image like you can see for NotebookLM or Perplexity. So that's pretty cool. Makes it a little easier to see a synopsis of what's going on in the cards view. But now let's go to our all sources view, and I'm going to click duplicate view. We'll call this articles, and then I'm going to go over to filter this view where content type is article, and I'm going to just do this for each of my various views. Duplicate this view, call this YouTube, filter. Cool. So now you can see I've got a few different views here. They're all available in cards. I can go change the way the cards view looks if I want to. I can add more properties. For example, I could include publish date, and that would appear beneath each card. I can include the reference so that I have the URL that's easily clickable. You can customize this however you want. And you just always have now, anytime I create a new file with the Obsidian Web Clipper that is from Perplexity, NotebookLM, ChatGPT, etc., it will automatically go into my AI chats view. If I clip a YouTube video, it'll go into YouTube, an article here, academic papers here, and you can just add as many content types as you want to within this specific base. Okay, so that pretty much completes the web source walkthrough. So in a previous video, in video 1, I made this book space, which has all these cards here. But there's been a couple updates here that I think will be helpful to show you. So the first one is that it's much easier now to reference an external link to provide the URL. So let's say I go over to Finding Flow. If I go to Goodreads and search Finding Flow, one of my favorite books, and now I go up to the Obsidian Web Clipper, I have a Goodreads template that will automatically populate this and drop it in, which will then be interpreted in my sources base if I want to, but we're dealing with the book space specifically. So you can see that there's this cover property. I can just copy that URL, drop it into a new cover property here, paste it, and then go back to the table, and the image has automatically populated. So it makes it really easy to just drop in the URL to the image that you can pull from Goodreads directly, and then you get this really nice card view of all of your books. So that's the first tip that I wanted to show you, that now rather than having to have an internal file within your vault, like you can see with this both and thinking one, you can just link a URL, like the one for breadth or Finding Flow that I just added. And another one is that we can introduce icons very easily using a new formula. So for example, let's say we go to Name of the Wind, one of my favorite books of all time. And we can see that there's a rating here. So I'm going to give this a rating of 5 because it's one of my favorite books. Now what we can do is we can introduce a new property here. We can click Add Formula, call this rating, the same name, and we'll give it the formula of star in quotes dot repeat rating. So pulling in the rating property, repeating it for the number of times that the rating property is there, and giving it the star. And you can see that this 5 stars just appeared right below here. So it's a really cool way where you can add this dynamic property, and now I can go in to each book that I have and rate the level that I think it is worth, and go back, and it will automatically update to include that. So that's just another little tip that I noticed, that you can add some emojis or icons in here, and you can just make it a little bit more visual. Probably don't need to have the actual cover image. I was just kind of showing you that. But you get an at-a-glance view of your books and which ones you liked, which ones you didn't. You could add a property here now. Before you weren't able to, but you can add a new property called read or not read, and you could make that a checkbox property. There's now the option to use checkboxes in here, so you can then just toggle directly from in here whether or not you've read something, and then you could filter on the side to have read versus not read. There's no end to what you can do here. And then, like I mentioned, if you want to, we could just create a new content type. I could go over here to Goodreads. I could introduce a property of content type, call it book. And now if I go to Finding Flow and I go to Goodreads and I want to bring in the description, all of this type, I can just click Add to Obsidian. It will get brought in here. I need to do a little tweaking to fix up the linking of the genre. But now we have a book and it automatically pulls in the book card with the reference image correctly. So I could now go and just duplicate this view, call it books, and then filter, change this to book. And now all of my books would appear in here. I could just go to the main cards view, and rather than having cover image fit, I can change this to contain, and then it would automatically fit each cover image based on what it's actually supposed to be. So I was going to show you a little bit more on the project management side of things, but I think it's probably better if you just go watch the dedicated video if you want to learn how to organize projects, because it's a little bit more complicated on how everything ties together. So the final thing I want to mention is just that there are some syntax changes. There's a few things on dynamic properties and how to use bases now that it's released for everyone. So if you're looking for help on that, I recommend going to the help.obsidian.md/bases. It has a full intro and overview of all the different syntax here. So if you're looking to learn how to build this in a more customized way, you can always go check out this website here, or save this to Obsidian and then drop that note into NotebookLM and ask NotebookLM to help you build your base. I hope that this demonstration of how you can use bases in the Obsidian Web Clipper was very helpful for illustrating the power of combining both the capture step and the organize step all in Obsidian, where your note taking is happening anyways. By having this dynamic dashboard with the sources base automatically populate with all of your existing notes and your new notes as they come in, it provides a very clean way to keep your whole Obsidian vault organized. And the key here is that the property type I introduced, content type, can be applied to any other type of base. You just need to introduce a new type property that can then be ingested by the base, and you'll have an automatically built organization system. I talk about this a lot more in depth in my project management video, so I recommend checking out that video if you're interested in seeing how you can get from beginner to advanced with project management in Obsidian Bases. I also walk through how you can use dynamic properties, where you have these auto-updating properties like due dates built into the project management base. So there's a lot more features that I didn't get to in today's video on bases that I've covered in previous videos, so I highly recommend checking out that playlist. A reminder that if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, and consider sharing with a friend. Especially if they're a Notion user who's considering switching to Obsidian, now's the perfect time to do so. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.